Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. How is chat? How is chat? Remember, everybody, join up to Discord. Start posting everywhere there. I want to see it lit with links, everything, news stories. I want it all.
Man, someone's getting greedy real quick.
Yeah, no, sorry. I'm too big for my boots. I'm just excited. I'm just excited because I'm finally relevant to something.
You're finally
Finally
relevant?
relevant.
Finally relevant? Wow. Okay. So, specifically, we can talk about two things. Originally, let's talk about Trump's thing, what he said about Iran. So, when did you hear about what he said about Iran, about the cultural sites?
Oh man, that was about maybe 5 days ago. I can't even remember the day, but I remember seeing it and thinking, wow, this is getting worse. I mean, the thing is, one of the biggest problems with it is that, like, I saw a lot of people get more, like, antsy about the fact that, like, culture sites were being destroyed, rather than thinking, if if they bomb an entire country, maybe some people will die. Because I'll be honest here, I'd rather, like, 1,000 pieces of cultural heritage destroyed if that meant that somebody's life was spared. Because at the end of the day, none of this is without like some form of like cost of human life. And actually, that's something I've been trying to kind of write about at the moment with some of my blog posts. I've got one coming up, and I'm trying to think about. I'm trying to yeah. I'm trying to think about like how we can actually piece together a good response to this. Because to be honestly fair, it's just window dressing.
Mm-hmm.
You
So,
know,
wouldn't you say, though, that when somebody says, for example, how to put this? When someone says they're going to target cultural sites, they're saying explicitly that they're going to target something that is outside the realm of what would usually be considered a strategic target, if they're explicitly saying that, which shows intention to install fear in the populace, and it's a little different for those reasons.
I mean, it's terrorism. Like, let's be frank about it. It's terrorism, but like done at a like a country scale. That's really what it is. And
Would you
I'll
make
be
the
honest.
argument that a someone who is a terrorist or terror group doesn't necessarily have to be a non-state actor?
Oh yeah, no, totally. Like,
Okay.
I think the thing is that, well, I think it's just part of when you're talking about country sizes that you're talking about situations where like the casual and superficial use of the word terrorism doesn't really usually come across people's minds. However, what you're effectively doing is number one, you're targeting sites that will most likely have people at them. You know, like let's be honest here, cultural sites aren't just empty. You know, they either have people looking after them 24/7 or they have visitors. You know, the second thing you're doing is you're attacking people culturally. Let's be honest here. Like culture and cultural sites brings in lots of like money. It's a great economic source of funding for a lot of places.
That isn't something I
Um,
considered.
yeah, I mean, like think about anywhere. I mean, I think maybe the UK is a bit more kind of on the ball with this in terms of like I just feel like the UK we're very aware of how much money comes in because of like our cultural
Uh-huh.
heritage. I don't know if it's the same really in America, whether you guys really consider like cultural heritage as like a means of earning money, but
I mean, someone lives near DC. We definitely tourism matters a lot to DC revenue.
mhm,
When it comes to like the Washington Monument, like Lincoln Memorial, all the museums. We
mhm.
have a ton of museums in DC, like the African American History
Yeah,
Museum. We have
exactly,
like the
yeah.
Postage Stamp Museum. We have like so many museums. Of
Mhm.
course, the
I
Holocaust
mean,
Museum, like a bunch.
yeah, yeah. I think one of my biggest thing was that there's like the response to that. I mean, to be actually fair, I th- when I saw it, I thought it was prevarication. It was like a show. I didn't actually think he would actually go and do it. I don't know. What's your take on that?
I mean, my thing is, there's no way Trump alone thought of the idea of targeting cultural heritage, right? There's no way that he sat in his room and got the idea that I'm going to put out a tweet where not only we target 52 sites specifically, he didn't go to a map and say, this nuclear reactor, or this one, because of strategic. Someone did that for him, which suggests to me that there's people within his administration telling him we should attack cultural sites, which scares me a lot more than him coming up with it.
Yeah, Definitely. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised that this wasn't like on the cards a long time ago. Like, let's be honest, like the Trump administration, despite people going in and out of it like a revolving door, has had some pretty awful people in it.
Oh
And I
yeah.
would not be surprised that like even if they've left, maybe some of their staff
I
have
mean,
left been
Steve
like,
Bannon,
oh
Elliot
yeah.
Abrams, John
Mm,
Bolton, Stephen Miller, Mike Pompeo,
mm.
Sean Spicer sucked. Literally anybody who touches. I mean, Rudy Giuliani sucks, but he's like his lawyer, but he's basically part of the administration. All of his kids. I mean, literally everybody who
Dylan,
touches the administration.
Dylan, why are they all white? Oh
My
no, no,
man,
no.
my main man, Ben Carson.
Do you know what? Funny historical thing about Ben Carson. He believes he knows what the pyramids were used for. Ben Carson basically, like, I don't know why. I have no idea why, but he like turns around and he's like, I believe the pyramids are probably used for like storing grain.
Oh, yeah, do you remember that? So, can you tell me how correct he is on the scale to 10 to absolutely true?
Well, he is partially true. This is like one of those moments where, like, you know, when the
Really?
lie meter kind of goes all over the place. Because in a technicality, a lot of offerings were made with buried with the pharaohs. The idea in ancient Egyptian kind of like afterlife, what you were buried with physically kind of came along with you. And so, you know, people would have like food buried along with them.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, there was probably some grain stored alongside the pyramids and in ancient Egypt. However, it wasn't the primary function. And he was completely wrong in saying it, making it sound like it's a primary function. But I couldn't say there's 100% no grain in a
So, what you're telling me is
Egyptian
that Ben
pyramid.
Carson is a certified archaeologist and he should head American expeditions.
You know what? I'm feeling generous. Anybody's an archaeologist in my world. You know, that's
Wow.
the whole key
I'm an
about being.
archaeologist?
Yeah,
Then why
man.
the hell do I need you on?
Hey, no, no, no. You have to understand. I'm the anarchaeologist. I don't believe in hierarchies. I don't believe that any archaeologist is better than anybody else. We all bring something to the table. You're like my foreign policy archaeologist. I got like a ancient bones archaeologist. I got all my archaeologists. We're like a little crew, a little team.
Ah, okay. So,
But
you
hey,
would say that Elliot Abrams would be our war crime archaeologist.
yeah, no, definitely, definitely. I think what I want to draw back to is like a larger thing about I don't really think that people understand that cultural heritage and history is as much a part of modern foreign policy as people would like to think. Because I think it's pretty obvious that there's a lot of things happening in the background, especially with cases of repatriation, where items are kind of kept in a colonial power and a country previously a colony state wants the return of those items. Nigeria, great example. The Benin bronzes currently in London. I mean, Nigeria has been asking for them back. We're going on decades. Ethiopia recently wanted some of its stuff back from the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And I mean, the museum turned around and said, "Hey, we'll give you them, but we'll give you them on loan. You
Ah,
know, your own stuff. You know."
yes. When
But
somebody steals my shit, I want it back on loan.
but I just want to put yourself in the mind of like a country who you want some stuff back repatriated. Now you know that the UK, for example, isn't really big on repatriating stuff because it means they have to admit they've done something wrong.
Yeah, and you got to think like they had a whole entire empire built on like colonialism and all this other stuff. And so since
So
you had that empire, you got a lot of stuff along the way.
mhm,
Maybe the treasure wasn't the end goal or the friends we made along the
mhm.
way, but the treasure we stole along the way.
Precisely that. Now, if I'm a country trying to get that stuff back, maybe I'll do some good deals with the UK to show how open I am, and I, pat the UK on the back a couple of times and they then turn over and say, "Oh, actually, you know what? We'll give you back your items on loan." You see what I mean? There's the leverage there. And I think sometimes we're all too ready to discard cultural heritage as some sort of leisurely
So what
thing.
you're saying is that we stole their cultural heritage, and the ones we didn't steal we're now threatening to blow up. or actively blowing up, as in the case of Yemen.
Beautiful, beautiful. I've written stuff before, and I actually have a couple podcasts because that's what I do. Plug time. I talked about how the the way that we in the UK, for example, speaking from experience, talk about heritage and the preservation of heritage, it's first as a tragedy, then as a farce. Because ultimately, we talk all about, oh, ISIS blew up this, and ISIS are bad, and ISIS are destroying cultural heritage. The Middle East will
please
never
say that
survive.
a little bit more seriously, just to make sure you're not like dismissing what ISIS did.
No, of course not. I'm not dismissing what they did, but
Yes.
what I'm saying is, I find there's this kind of weird, superficial kind of like, oh, they're the bad guys, ignoring the fact that we, over the last 10 years, have been changing planning laws. We've taken funding out of museums. There's repositories of like artifacts that are all filling up, and we haven't got money for them, and those items are slowly decaying and decaying and decaying. And it's like the conundrum of a doctor. Is it like, do you actively kill the like there's a difference between killing a patient and letting a patient die. There's a difference between like preserving heritage and letting it decay. Or sorry, in this case, bombing heritage and letting it decay. And I think that all too easy people see the big spectacular bombs going off in the Middle East that ISIS are doing. And let's be honest, ISIS was doing it completely as like a show. They
would take in
a show.
hammers, move in, and like destroy Assyrian artifacts and such.
And then, sell all the stuff underhand as well at the same time.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to get at is that like ISIS, not as bad as everybody thinks, because ultimately we're just as bad in term. Well, no, what I mean is,
be careful.
How do I want to word this? I want to word this as, even though ISIS are doing terrible stuff, blowing things up, we shouldn't dismiss that we are not doing the best we can to preserve heritage at the same time. And there's no point in fawning like this care.
I think the best way you could put it is that it's very hypocritical for us to criticize ISIS on the grounds of blowing up cultural sites when we also have done it.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But have we done it on? Let me ask you a question. Have we done it on purpose? That's the question I want to ask you. Because they did it deliberately as a show of force. To not only like they take sledgehammers to do it very precisely. They didn't like blow up a building and be like, well, there were terrorists in there. I mean, they just straight up took hammers and did it openly and say this is part of our ideology, is to erase everyone else's culture. I would say it's fundamentally. Wouldn't you say that's a little different?
Yeah, I think I'm fed up with the justifying and the kind of like the constant kind of idea that heritage is just some luxury that people kind of push aside, when really it has a lot more cultural value and a lot more influence than people really paid heed. So I'm very, very strong on the whole, let's look after heritage, even the boring stuff. Even the boring stuff is like interesting enough to preserve.
You know what? Like if someone bombs our national straw collection, like that's still bad.
Yeah, no, exactly. And actually, the original story you were talking about was it was Yemen, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, like, honestly, like Yemen is really.
I sent you the article so we can go over it on stream.
Yeah, let's go.
But first, I wanted to ask you about if, number one, you do believe what Trump threatened is a war crime, right?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Cultural heritage.
How rich is Iranian culture, and what kind of sites could he target there?
Oh, buddy, like Iran, like the Middle East goes back thousands of years. Like, so Iran, modern day Iran, used to be Babylon. Everybody's heard of Babylon, Hanging Gardens of Babylon, all that kind of stuff. Some of the first kind of like rudimentary written languages come from the area that is now modern day Iran, and you can trace that back through then to modern day. You've got the Zoroastrians, you've got the after the Zoroastrians, you've got like the Christians, the Muslims, and even now modern day Iran, the Baha'is, who are like a religious group who are currently persecuted by Iran. there's a lot of history there in a very small space of time, with a lot of people who are kind of like intermingling. I mean, I'll let me just draw up some of the Iranian cultural sites just to name them, because I'm really bad at Iranian names. So I'm in this team with you, Dylan. I'm really bad at naming cultural sites.
I do my best. Names are my weakness. They suck with names.
No, it's fine. Like, because I grew up in like Northern Ireland. I kind of pronounce things funnily occasionally, and I get made fun of. No end. Let me have a look here. I mean, Iran is very famous for its mosques. Would you be surprised?
Yeah, what a surprise.
But if we're talking in terms of like ancient sites, I think we're more looking at like there's a place called it's the Byzantine inscription, or the Byzantine inscription. It's in the Kermanshah province of Iran, and that's in western Iran. And I mean, it's, let me just see. I have to get the date that this was made in, but it's a massive procession. You know what? I'll link a picture into chat, just for chat, because this is visual. This is visual kind of stuff. Thanks, Taz. You're doing my work for me. I should have been prepared. Do you know what I've been reading?
Looks beautiful. That really looks like how old is that?
That one that'll probably be BC sometime. BC maybe 50. Yeah, 522 BC.
So this is over almost 3,000 years old.
Yeah, that's pretty old. I mean, if you put that into context.
It's almost as old as you.
Hey, I'm not actually that old, buddy. It's just because you're young. I mean, at the same time, this is in the middle of the Persian Empire. So you've got, was it Cambyses the second of Persia, now ruling in around this time, and you've also got things happening in China as well.
Someone just made a post in chat. Iran is the cradle of civilization. The whole country is almost a cultural site.
I mean, they're half right. Like when we talk about, especially things like the history of agriculture.
Oh shit! I just got a raid. 1 second.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Johnny Scarlett, for raiding with 74 people. That's amazing. Thank you so much for the raid. I've been wanting to stream with you for some time now. I've been following you for a little bit. Hopefully sometime we can stream together. Right now, everybody coming in, we're talking about the targeting of cultural sites during war with a certified #1 best in the world archaeologist. And we're talking about this because of Trump's threats to bomb war crimes in Iran. I mean, to bomb cultural sites in Iran. And in Yemen, I found an article talking about the destruction of cultural sites. So we're trying to go through that, and I thought it was a really interesting topic, and he offered to come on, so we're just talking to an archaeologist about this. So continue.
Great. So some of the ones I've mentioned, like that one, Byzantine relief carving, is a UNESCO heritage site. However, there are some really cool places in Iran that aren't. They're kind of like, part of them are World Heritage Sites and some of them aren't. Another really amazing place is Persepolis. It's the ceremonial capital of the Archaemenid Empire. So this is this is just starting a little bit earlier than the other relief that we just saw. And this goes until about 330 BC. So I'll give you a couple of really good pictures, because I think you have to really see this to believe it. This is awesome. But referring back really quickly to about the cradle of civilization. So in the Middle East, we kind of look at places where farming kind of started, and it seems that there was a kind of region around the Middle East where a lot of communities started farming and started doing agriculture. So this is Persepolis that you're kind of seeing at the moment. Yeah. It's absolutely beautiful.
It is beautiful, and the fields around it are very nice too. Everything looks. It's strange that so much of this is still intact.
It is great. I mean, this is the crazy thing. The Mediterranean has so much ancient monumental history that like has active kind of like excavations going on, active kind of
I want to
information.
ask you a question.
Yeah, go.
So let's say Trump was to say this site or any other cultural site was of strategic importance, because some people made the argument that what Trump was talking about is strategic locations. Now, to be fair, he said cultural sites, and if it was strategic, he would have said it. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say that somehow that's what he meant. Could you make, if I came to up to you and said that this one location is of strategic importance for whatever reason, would you buy it?
No, no. I do not think that in a military situation, which let's be honest, these airstrikes are, the, the, none of this is strategic. You know, the only strategy you have here is to make people fear that their cultural heritage will be destroyed, or make people fear that wherever they are is going to be bombed. That's the only strategy here. There is nothing. I mean, like, if you're having a war with somebody, you don't say you're going to like bomb the Eiffel Tower. You know, like you
Mm-hmm.
don't say you're going to bomb like the Statue of Liberty. You know, who would bomb the Statue of Liberty in a war?
Um,
Okay, that's a really bad point. Okay,
there's a
like
lot of people who would.
I mean, like another state. You know, like I think this
Um,
is the
I would still make the argument. There's a lot of people who would.
I think maybe I don't think there's a genuine strategy to bombing a cultural resource other than you want to annoy people and piss them off. You know?
What about installing fear, saying that if you don't surrender, we'll bomb your cultural sites?
Yeah, no, definitely, one hundred
That's about
percent.
the only like tactic. I think that's the main point of it. It's
Mhm,
either that
mhm.
or somebody wants to commit cultural genocide, which that would be what ISIS wanted to do, for example.
Yeah,
ISIS
yeah.
wasn't doing it to install fear. ISIS had no problem installing fear.
Hmm.
Um, it was just they wanted to commit cultural
Yeah.
genocide.
And I mean, it's not just even happened by Iran. I mean, like oh, what do they call the name forgives like escapes me now, but the Bamiyan Buddhas up in Afghanistan, they were bombed because I think it's the Taliban wanted to remove that culture from the mountainside. I'll go and see if I can get a picture of that. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Part of this, definitely within the Middle East by ISIS, is definitely cultural, kind of cultural erasure. Whereas I think in American sense, it's just literally smashing the family heirlooms. It's really about installing fear. It's like, oh, I've broken one finger. You better not do anything more, otherwise I'll break another finger. That's really what's happening here.
Okay, so categorically, you would say now. Let's say for whatever reason there was. Now this has happened that people will use sites that are usually not supposed to be bombed as cover. People do that.
Yeah.
What would you say is the best thing a nation should do while they're at war with any other nation, if that is the case?
I mean, obviously, I would advise any place not to use their cultural heritage as cover. That would be that. I mean, the thing is, a lot of these ancient sites, they they aren't replaceable. You know, archaeology can be seen as a finite resource. There's only, you know, if you bomb something that's like 3,000 years old, you're going to have to wait another 3,000 years for something to be that old again.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's a real risk that what what you do by placing yourselves in it, you risk destroying that culture for your own country. But I think there is a like a wider view of, I don't think that a country's culture really has to is only for internally, you know, for its own citizens. I think I'm a bit of a romantic when it comes to the idea of a world heritage. Now, obviously, that's within the practice of decolonization and taking away all the post colonial and imperialist kind of like problems in the world. But I do like to see that all countries' history is a part of humanity's history, and that what connects us through that history and through that understanding and that cultural knowledge is more than what divides us.
I
Okay,
just got a
I'm over
comment.
my saltiness. Yeah, that's
No
really
problem.
salt.
I got a comment. Um, Tory News says that they'll be meeting Nina Turner and Dr. Cornel West at the debate watch party in Des Moines, Iowa tomorrow night. I didn't even know the debate was tomorrow night. I completely lost track of that. But that's really cool, Torian, that you're going to be meeting them. Give them one for me, okay? Okay, so let's go through this article finally. Let's go through this
Yeah,
article.
let's
Okay.
go.
So, what the article we were reading, everybody. This is specifically since we're talking about Trump's statement he wanted to target cultural sites in Iran. This is about the agony of Sadah. I believe I pronounced that right. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. Let's go for that.
It talks about the U.S. and Saudi bombs that have targeted Yemen's ancient heritage. Okay. Shards of blue and red and green stained glass, remnants of an intricate crescent window that is a 4,000-year-old Yemeni art form, glitter in the sunlight before crushing underfoot. Atop a mound of dust and muds of sand, that shell of ancient tower house, sliced in half like a cake by airstrike. In addition to the growing number of civilian casualties, by the way, everybody, when you look at civilian casualties in Yemen, it is a slaughter. And the amount of the resources that are being blocked from moving in, that have been thousands and tens of thousands, about tens of thousands, close to 100,000 children have starved to death. It is practically a genocide, and I believe some organizations have even classified it as a genocide. This is a horrible thing that's going on in Yemen. But we're just hitting on something. We could hit on that a million times a day, but this is something that we don't talk about much. I wanted to talk about the archaeological consequences. In addition to the growing number of civilian casualties in the country's 7-month-long war, U.S.-made bombs dropped by fighter jets from a Saudi Arabian-led coalition are pulverizing Yemen's architectural history, often referred to as a living museum. These airstrikes are tearing villages apart, forcibly displacing thousands, and erasing the country's immutable heritage, possibly in violation of international humanitarian law, according to the World Heritage UNESCO. The World Heritage Body UNESCO. Entire villages in Yemeni highlands appear to defy gravity. Remote high-rise clings precariously to cliff edges. Inside, the character of fortress-like homes changes with the sun as it moves through the sky. Light filters through the stained glass of patterned window panes, called, quamaries, I believe it's pronounced, quamaries, illuminating the white gypsum plaster. At night, candles or rare supplies of electricity send dapples of color into the twilight. Yemen's time-honored homes are part of the country's rich social fabric, embodying the culture of families who have lived in them for centuries. The Middle East's poorest nation is famous for constructing the world's first skyscrapers, often up to 100 feet high, with as many as 11 stories, designed to keep extended families and their livestock safely under one roof. The violent assault on the country's history over the past 7 months began in March, after a political power struggle between incumbent President Abdul Rabu Mansur Hadi and Houthi rebels backed by soldiers loyal to the former president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, descended into civil war. It's very complicated. I'll cover it in a future stream. But Yemen's, most people don't know, there used to be a communist Yemen. Really interesting. But Yemen's internal conflict has also landed the country's 26 million people in Yemen in the middle of a regional struggle between Sunni Saudi Arabia and Shiite Iran, already at loggerheads over the war in Syria. I've been hearing the word loggerheads a lot in articles about the Middle East, and it's starting to really rustle my jimmies. After the predominantly Shiite Houthi rebels seized control of the capital, Sana'a, last year, Saudi Arabia and a coalition of nations supported by the United States launched an unrelenting aerial bombing campaign. There have been near daily raids ever since. Not to huge effect, by the way, when it comes to military gains. The Saudis say they intervened in Yemen for 2 reasons: to restore the Hadi government, forced into exile by Saleh's loyalists in the military, collabing with the Houthis, who they claim are an Iranian proxy, and to counter what they view as a growing threat by Iran to seize power and influence the region. The level of Tehran's support, however, is disputed. I would say that when it comes to the Yemen civil war, I just want to be clear. It's basically a proxy conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran when it comes to them, and of course the internal domestic issues within Yemen and the support for the former president and the current president, and of course the Houthis divide and they feel lack of representation in government. At least 5,604 people, including 2,577 civilians, have died since the conflict began in March, according to United Nations tally figures from local health facilities. That number is most definitely an undercount of the real figure, because many of the dead or injured never reach medical treatment centers, and bodies are often buried unrecorded. And this also, I don't know if this even talked about the amount of people who have starved to death. But that's it's much higher than the numbers that I'm seeing right there. A joint report. This is also, by the way, this is started in 2015. This article was written in 2015, so that's why the number is so low. It's because this is a 5-year-old document, and that number alone, for me, that number alone is already horrific. But think about what has happened in the last 5 years, and also the blockade and the stopping of resources going into the country and the starvation. So it is a slaughterhouse. A joint report by the UK-based charity Action on Armed Violence and United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs concluded that airstrikes were responsible for 60% of civilian casualties in the first 7 months of this year. And there's a picture of some of the destruction. Okay. So this talked about, we're going to stop for a little bit, and because I wanted to ask you. They said that Yemen was like living history, like a living museum. Can you explain what that means?
Well, I mean, like Yemen and that part of the region has been going pretty long. So we're talking about, I think, was it the Manaen people? I would say the Manaen people, who were inhabitants of the kingdom of Manaen, are what is now modern day Yemen, and we're talking about the 6th century BC. Maybe I think there's also, that's why the provisional capital is the 4th century. I'm getting it now. So for reference, the 6th century BC in UK, for example, in Britain, was the British Iron Age. You know, so while the British had their Iron Age, or should I say the inhabitants of the British Isles had Iron Age, there was a huge monumental cities being built by the Manaeans in Yemen. Definitely something that has a lot of history there. I mean, if you have your history for over, 3,000 years, there's going to be a lot of material there.
Would you say to me that do people there live in buildings that are how old, that people like are actively living in?
As far as I can tell from some of the reports there, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of years old. Like, people's houses are, in a sense, like cultural heritage in of themselves.
So it's like going into almost a time capsule when you look at the archaeology.
Definitely.
Okay.
I think I'm very cautious not to kind of like other, Yemen in the terms of like, I think there's good reasons why people may have stayed within certain areas that were cultural sites, probably because of economic and like social and cultural reasons. And I think the value with regards to Yemeni kind of heritage is the fact that we actually don't know enough about it. The thing is, Yemen, because of the war and because of the ongoing problems in Yemen, not a lot of information comes out of Yemen. And if I was to go and look for the information, I would be able to get some kind of older info about Yemen, maybe stuff done probably around the turn of the century, but not really a lot recent published information. And for that reason alone, I think we need to really think about what sort of information is coming out of the Middle East in terms of the heritage there.
Okay, we're going to read a little bit more of this article.
Yeah, cool.
One of the worst hit areas has been Yemen's northern province of Sadr, the birthplace and homeland of the Houthi movement. Sadr city, the provincial capital, was founded before the 4th century BC as the hub of the Manian kingdom of Maine, which was what you were talking about, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. On May 8th, the Saudi coalition declared Sadr city home to 50,000 people, a military zone, which Human Rights Watch says is a clear violation of international humanitarian law. If True Love Lord was here, I'd love to bring him in and ask him about that. But and gave civilians a few hours notice to leave, which again, not how you not how you deal with civilians. They don't you just pick up their entire life and leave like that. Many of those who did not heed the coalition's warning were forced to flee their homes by the ensuing airstrikes. The village of Rahaban, on the outskirts of the city, were razed, and consisted entirely of historic, centuries-old multistory homes with thick rammed earth walls, rainbow-colored stained glass windows, and hand-carved wooden doors. Timber joists that supported families for tens of generations now protrude from piles of rubble. More than 30 homes were wiped out. Ibrahim al-Sabara, 23, and his relatives were one of the more than 100 families who fled their homes to escape an apparently deliberate tactic of forced displacement of civilians that could amount to a war crime under Article 53 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. The bombardment that destroyed his home started just after 3 a.m. and killed 2 of al-Sabara's cousins. "Now we have no home. It's gone forever," said al-Sabara, who was struggling to rent a house for his family in the city. Raban is where the poorest people in Sadr city lived. The only thing of value that we had was our homes. The newest houses there were more than 100 years old. On May 9th, a day after the coalition's ultimatum for civilians to leave, multiple airstrikes hit the heart of Sadr's historic old city. Abdu Ta, 28, witnessed 3 bombings that hit... Hey, Zaktar, thank you so much for hosting. Bombings that hit the market in front of the 9th century Al-Hadi Mosque, killing 2 patients along with a doctor who practiced out of his house next door to the mosque. 4 others, including a second doctor, were also killed, he said. The mosque is the final resting place of Imam al-Hadi of an Imam, the first Shiite Zaidi Imam of Yemen, who died in 911 AD. Local legend has it that the site of the mosque is where the Prophet Muhammad's camel once rested, but today the mosque's prominent green dome is cracked like an eggshell and its door blown out. Repeated ground-shaking strikes just a few feet away from the high walls surrounding the structure have crumbled its ceilings. For the first time in its 1,200-year history, the Hidim Mosque is now closed. So you talked about the targeting of homes and mosques, and well, this specifically went into detail. You hearing about this, as an archaeologist, as somebody whose whole job is to uncover history and try to show people like the roots of their culture and of their their people's history, how does something like reading a story like this make you feel?
Well, I mean, like, how can you not feel depressed? Because the thing is that, you know, when people are not in a position to preserve their heritage and preserve the history, it's obvious that it's all because of this whole conflict. The thing is, the thing is, these are only things that we know about. There is so much heritage that we've lost in Yemen over the years. I mean, if I actually was just checking while you were reading, when was the last kind of archaeological studies and research done in Yemen that actually came out of Yemen? And like, I could find maybe 1 or 2 papers, but really the last really stuff that people were doing in the 70s. And archaeological research has come a long way since then, I can tell you. Like, we have to rely on like local archaeologists. We have to rely on people on the ground. And the fact is that they're doing that heritage analysis while trying to avoid a war. It's just not the right place. It's not the right situation for any heritage to be in. Never mind no people to be in. I think at the end of the day, this is all really sad and terrible that we're losing all this culture. but at the same time, it reflects the fact that we're losing so many people's lives at the same time.
You can't enjoy culture if you're dead.
Yeah, no, that's definitely. Look, I'm gonna have to head in a couple of minutes. Is there any kind of closing
Um,
things?
I'm probably gonna finish the article and I'll probably analyze it by myself. But if you need to head out, that's fine, man.
No worries, no worries. You got me for another 2 minutes,
Okay.
right?
Well,
Use me however you wish.
Okay, we'll read a few more things off of this. We want peace. We call for peace. We don't want our people divided," said a cleric, historian, and caretaker of the abandoned mosque. He sat among the rubble in a broken chair at the edge of a 10-foot deep crater in front of the main entrance and fretted that the community's essential culture and religious heritage would be lost. The fact that Sunni Saudi Arabia, whose king has the title of custodian of the two holy mosques of Mecca and Medina, is now bombing a town once famous as a seat of Shiite Zaidi scholarship, is not lost on the man. This is just a title. They still target the people they hate. The destruction of historical sites and Shiite mosques is not unique to Yemen. One of Saudi Arabia's coalition partners, Bahrain, demolished or vandalized at least 35 Shiite mosques during the country's political uprising against Sunni rule in 2011, according to Bahrain Center for Human Rights, all with Saudi backing. The Saudi kingdom has shown very little, if any, regard for its own historical sites. The former destruction of Mecca Hajj Research Center previously stated that by 2008, more than 300 ancient sites have been destroyed in Mecca and Medina alone. Is Saudi Arabia particularly a large violator of, and just a large factor in the destruction
No,
as an actor?
I think you summed it up very well there when you asked if Saudi Arabia was a violator. I think, yeah, I think.
I mean, not only a
comes as
violator,
no
but are they like
surprise.
a bigger abuser than usual than other countries usually? Like, do they target? Do you think Saudi Arabia does this on purpose?
Oh yeah, definitely. No, this is. I mean, this is political and ideological kind of cultural erasure. You know, I think, um, to some extent, we saw this in America for a long time, where Native American sites in America were kind of like either bulldozed over, overlooked, or worse, it was attributed to previous like white people had come there before. And if you want to look up what this is about, the mysteries of the mound builders. This is where like ancient monuments and monumental kind of geography by Native Americans were kind of attributed to extinct or dead like white generations instead of the Native Americans. And that was all ideologically done, you know. And I think for the same, this kind of like ideology, this kind of clean ideology that Saudi Arabia has to have, everything has to be how they wish it to be. It's, you know, for them, culture is just something that supports what they're thinking. You know, by destroying history, you're effectively destroying what makes that culture real, and all you're left with is this like husk, this outside, this performance. Whereas like history is difficult. History is sometimes very challenging to come to terms with, and if you destroy it, you've nothing to kind of ground yourself in. You know, the only way you can learn is by reading and understanding what's happened before. So if you're going to destroy it, I mean, you're only doing that to kind of like keep up the facade.
Yeah.
But that's just my personal opinion on that.
Thank you for taking your time out of your day to spend a little time with us on the stream and talk about this and giving us your expert opinion. I really appreciate it. I don't want to keep you any longer.
No worries, man. Well, thank you very much for letting me talk. I'm not an expert on the Middle East archaeology. There are a lot of archaeologists out there who are really, really great at that. So,
please plug yourself, by the way.
Oh, yeah. No, don't worry. So I run a show called Modern Myth, an archaeologist on Twitter. I also help run the Archaeology Podcast Network. So if you're interested in the history of the past and everything, check us out on all your podcast streaming apps and all that. So, yeah. Thanks, and yeah, I might return sometime if you have me back, Dylan.
I'll always have you on, man. You have a wonderful day.
And of course, I'll have you on sometime. All right.
Oh yeah, eventually they want to have me on. I don't know for whatever reason how I could be of help to that topic, but I'd love to come on.
Don't worry, we'll find you a place. All right, no worries. All best to chat. Bye.